you, President. My question is also for the Minister for Agriculture. Earlier this year, the government released an independent scientific review into the farming of birds and poultry. The Farm Bird Welfare Science Review was written by the University of Bristol, which is well renowned for its work in farmed bird welfare, and was extremely thorough and independently peer-reviewed by Australian and New Zealand scientists. While it did not make any recommendations, it presented overwhelming evidence in terms of the mental, behavioural and physical problems caused by housing hens in battery cages. The report also shone light on other practices such as forced moulting. Back in February this year, in this place, you indicated that this report would inform the government's position on what future poultry industry standards should be. So 6 months later, I wonder if you could update the House as to the progress with regard to developing the Victorian government position.
Minister, Ms Poultry.
Yeah, thanks very much. I thank Ms Pennicuik for the opportunity to provide the House with an update on the national process around poultry standards. And Ms Pennicuik is right. The government certainly takes a science-based approach to animal welfare, and as do, of course, many who operate in our industries. The issue of poultry welfare standards is something that ignites a great deal of passion in the Australian community, and I mean, of course, in Victoria, but this is a national process that we participate in, a national review that is underway. And if my memory serves me right, there are in an order of 600,000 submissions made to 800,000? Hundreds. Anyway, I think we can agree hundreds of thousands of submissions made to that national review process. The New South Wales government has been leading that process, and that is underway. We commissioned, my department commissioned a scientific review to provide additional support to our own decision-making processes, and that's publicly available document. Industry are aware of it, and we've provided it to the people coordinating the national review. That national review isn't moving particularly quickly, and so whilst I know that there's lots of people in the community, people in industry, people who like to eat chicken meat, like to eat eggs, who've got a view about animal welfare standards in the choices that they make as consumers. A lot of interest in this. It's important, I think, that we continue to participate in the national process. It would be completely premature for the Victorian government to express a view while that review ahead of that review being advanced to its next steps in terms of collating all of that feedback from all of those submissions, all of the science that's considered and all of the input from industry. When we are at a point to look at where the next steps have gotten to, that will then be the point at which the Victorian government develops a position to take into those national discussions on this. But what I would say to our poultry industry, and I hope that they know this, is that we are very, very supportive of our poultry industry in Victoria. There are many people who work in processing and in growing in many locations around the state. This is an industry that has often experienced some real challenges in terms of planning controls, interaction with neighbours, and I think some of the reforms that we've done in terms of intensive animal industries planning have certainly provided some additional surety to participants in that industry. Of course, many consumers now make choices about barn-laid and free-range eggs, and you do see, we all see that share of production and that share of the market increasing. The questions that people have about how this review will come out in the wash sometime in what I assume is 2019 will be many and varied, but again, our view about supporting Victorian industry to to be the best that it can in terms of high animal welfare standards will be the same view that we take and have taken the whole time that we've been in government, to supporting our animal industries to maintain exemplary standards.
Pennicuik, a supplementary question.
Thank you for your answer, Minister. Thank you, President. In fact, it was the public consultation process received 167,000 email submissions and an estimated 2,000 hard copy submissions. And the collation actually has been done of those submissions by an independent consultant. And it was clear, as you said, Minister, that the overwhelming number that this issue generates a lot of public interest, and the issues raised included the use of cages, beak trimming, induced moulting, stocking densities, lighting for poultry and slaughtering practices, and the majority of community submissions are opposed to the use of battery cages. Now, in your answer to me, Minister, you said that in this process you will be developing a position, but it's a bit of a circular argument. How can you go to this process without developing a position based on all the evidence that's there for you? So when will the government release its position that it's taking to the national process?
Thank you. So we are waiting to receive the next round of information from the national process. So, and Victoria is my department is participating in that. In terms of any policy decision, there is no need to be making any decision ahead of the development of the national process. It's incredibly important that we participate in the national process and that we are part of the national process. I think the last thing that any of us would want to see is for standards to be wildly different from one jurisdiction to the other, and for that to have quite significant job loss and industry consequences. I certainly don't want to see that. I think it's a pretty open secret that the South Australian government have very aggressively pursued a greater share of the national poultry industry, and that has presented some challenges to the Victorian industry. But we absolutely support the Victorian industry, and although the participants in the Victorian industry are committed to animal welfare and improving standards.